You can see me. Okay, right. Thank you.
Sir, are you able to hear? Good morning, sir. You are able to hear our audio, sir? Headquarters? Anand, sir?
Yes?
You are able to hear our audio, sir?
Yeah, I can hear your voice.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
How are you, Anand? All well?
How are you?
Okay.
I just find that this COVID has proved that I am very boring company. I am alone here and nalla bore adigirudhu. You must be busy in spite of COVID.
Well, better being bored and than being in a washing machine.
Yeah, but you people are still in the. I'm 10 ವರ್ಷ ಆಯ್ತು retire ಆಗಿ.
Ama.
Relatively things have cooled a bit, so it's not so bad.
No, but but you bring all the more value from a high altitude perspective.
From a higher altitude?
You bring all the more value from a higher altitude, I'm saying.
அதெல்லாம் இந்த இதில் சொல்லுவார் கிருஷ்ணா செட் இல்லை நம்மாழ்வார் தான் சொன்னார் போல இருக்கு கிருஷ்ணர் வரலன்னா ஐ வில் ஸ்டாப் த வில்லேஜ் ஃப்ரம் வர்ஷிப்பிங் யூன்னு சொன்னாராம் உடனே ஓடி வந்துட்டார் பகவான் வித்தவுட் டிவோட்டீஸ் தெர் இஸ் நோ காட் அப்படின்ட்டு அந்த மாதிரி as long as you have a few people who are putting you up you will survive அவ்வளோதான். Nice to see you smiling very happily.
These are classical. These are actually problems in it's a fluid mechanics problems about the onset of turbulence and the prediction of what happens. There are boundary conditions constantly changing. Initial conditions were many, and now you're trying to predict what is going to happen in your flow. It is a theoretically impossible task, but practically everyone is attempting it.
And everyone is talking about it Tangale from the television. Every other channel has its own predictions of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Anand, let me introduce you to Ms. Mahima Datla. She's the CEO and MD of Biologically, one of our best and largest vaccine companies. Dr. Anant Mahima is a former director of the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Hello, nice to meet you too. And there's a lady in the panel. There's apparently a lot of criticism on Twitter about that. But I think originally, Kiran Mazumdar Shah was supposed to be on the panel.
Correct.
I was telling Mahima COVID, but more than the gender diversity Mahima brings, Mahima is one of our leading industrialists, and she's really made India proud in the way the vaccine industry is dealing with this crisis.
Okay. Yeah, that's particularly of interest now.
Yes, sir, of course.
I think the chairman is also here. Morning, sir.
Dr. Shivan, like to introduce Ms. Mahima Datla.
Good morning, sir. Let me introduce myself. I am Uma Maheshwaran, Scientific Secretary in ISRO. So, I think all the participants, dignitaries are already there. Sunil Mittal will join by a little bit late. He said he's having an international seminar, so he'll be joining by around 12 o'clock. So that matches the time also. So first of all, let me start with welcoming all of you. It is a very, very important and very significant day today. We have a host of dignitaries to discuss and understand the uh, the, uh, the opening up of the space sector as announced by Government of India very recently. And not only the panel of dignitaries here, the connectivity is ensured to the I would say entire globe through YouTube and other social media. So I hope a large community of people may be watching this program. So the basic idea is to discuss about this the strategies that we are going to adopt with respect to opening of the space sector to the private industries and what is really meant by that. Dr. Shivan, Secretary Department of Space, as well as Chairman ISRO, is very much here. And sir, I request you to give the welcome address and lead us through this show.
Well, good morning to all of you. Respected Professor Vijayaraghavan sir, Anand sir, Mr. Sunil Mittal, Mr. Anand Mahendra, and Ms. Mahima Datla, my dear colleagues, friends, delegates from industry, academia, as well as startups. A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to this very, very important seminar or webinar on unlocking India's potential in space sector. This is a very important day for us, for the space area, for which is going to give a new era in the space technology in the country. Today, in this introductory session of this particular webinar, we have doyens from industry as well as academia. They are going to lead us and they are going to advise us what we have to do, how we have to conduct this particular activity which is introduced by the Government of India. First of all, let me welcome Professor Vijayaraghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India and an eminent biologist. He has been a central figure in formalizing the space sector reforms and is synergizing the indigenous effort in realizing COVID vaccine. I welcome Professor Anand, former director, IIT Madras. You may also recall that Professor Anand is a pioneer on online education in India. NPTEL, India's leading online learning platform for university level STEM subjects, is largely his brainchild. Today, when there is a paradigm shift happening in the online education sector, NPTEL is the most accessed library of peer-reviewed educational content in the world and is entirely free. I welcome Sunil Mittal, Chairman, Bharati Enterprises. Today, when we work from home, it's becoming a new normal. Bharati Airtel's digital infrastructure is providing the mission-critical internet support to crores of individuals and enterprises. Let me also compliment Mittal Saab for inauguration of undersea optical fiber link between Chennai and Andaman Nicobar Island in August 2020. Serving the underserved and unserved is the guiding principle of ISRO, and I'm extremely glad that Airtel shares those values also. I'm extremely happy to welcome Sri Anand Mahendra Saab, Chairman Mahindra Group. Let me first compliment Mr. Anand Mahendra and his team for launching India's most iconic passenger vehicle on 15th August 2020. It promises to explore the impossible. ISRO also shared this vision of exploring the impossible. We have our eyes set on every destination in the inner solar system. I am extremely happy to welcome Ms. Mahima Dattala, Managing Director of CEO Biologically Limited, Hyderabad, which is a pioneer private sector company in the manufacture of biological products. I'm sure that all of us present in today's webinar at one time or another would have benefited from their products. I'm assuming that they will all be playing a critical role in ensuring the availability of viable vaccine for our 1 billion plus population. Coming back to today's webinar, it is a full day event divided into 4 sessions, and details will be presented later by Scientific Secretary. However, let me briefly elaborate on the purpose of the space sector reforms, which government introduced and which is going to be a real game change in the space sector in India. You all know that private sector participation in the space program has been increasing worldwide. Private sector participation in space sector is a healthy trend as it increases the diversity in the space program. In India, we also have seen space sector startup taking up developmental activities in both the launch vehicle as well as the satellite field. However, there was no mechanism available in the country to extend any kind of technology or infrastructure support to them. Moreover, there was no regulatory mechanism to control the private sector activities because space activities, it is not a normal activity. It is having a lot of strategic importance. Also, that you know that it have a lot of risky elements also there. And being government of India is a signatory to the international community, any space activities, any destruction or anything happen, the responsibility, whether it's by government of India, agency or by private agencies, this has to be responsibilities which lies with the government of India. This is the reason we want a mechanism to regulate these activities. As part of ongoing reform, government of India has now created an institutional mechanism within Department of Space known as Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Sector, that is INSPACE. The space sector reforms in the Vikram Sarabhai's centenary year is of great symbolic value as it aims to widen the space industry base within the country. In addition, the New Space India Limited, a central PSU, has been empowered to carry out routine launches with industry realized PSLV and the satellite. When space sector reforms were announced by the government, there were many misconceptions like it would lead to privatization of ISRO. It is no. Again, I am repeating, it is not the privatization of ISRO. In fact, the whole mechanism, the whole aim of the system is enabling the private people to carry out the space activity which otherwise being done by ISRO. It is not privatization of ISRO. And in fact, that the activities of ISRO are going to increase with the time, and ISRO will be able to better utilize its resources in taking up the developmental as well as capacity building activities of the government of India rather than the routine production activities. Mainly, we are going to concentrate on the technology development, capacity building, and increasing our activity to the level of international level. ISRO, in addition to that, ISRO will also facilitate private sector participation in major national missions through announcement of opportunity. However, one important aspect which has to be made clear again is that private sector will have to do their own research and development activities, business viability studies, funding, as well as finding customers for their services, which otherwise right now being done by ISRO, which we are giving, allowing the private people to carry out this activity. The role of InSpace will be limited to providing technical know-how and infrastructure support in gap areas and same time promotion and the ideas and advisors. In addition, InSpace will also act as a regulatory body for private sector, private activities, space activities. One thing which has emerged during this pandemic is the importance of health as well as self-reliance. Good health is essential for high productivity. Government is taking proactive steps to make our country self-reliant in many areas. As part of this process, import of communication satellite is now in the embargo list. I'm extremely happy that the government has taken such step under that Atmanirbhar Bharat. And I am sure that this is going to continue and we are going to depend more and more on self-reliance. The capacity expansion in 4G services and introduction of 5G services will require large number of communication satellites to be launched in the immediate future. This could be a huge opportunity for ISRO, NSIL, and more importantly, for the private sector players. And I want not ISRO or NSIL, the private sector should get into this business. They have a lot of potential in this area. Launching small satellite is another area where there is a huge projected demand. I'm very happy that some of the startups are initiated this activity. They are interacting with us. I'm very happy that they are in very advanced stage and they are going to launch their launch vehicles very soon. With in-space mechanism in place, ISRO is gearing up to handhold as well as provide all possible support in terms of technology and infrastructure to ensure that your space endeavors succeed not only at national level but also at a global level. And I'm sure that academia, industry, as well as startup will make use of this opportunity in the right earnest and will contribute towards achieving self-reliance in the critical space sector technology. Thank you. Jai Hind.
The whole gamut of today's discussion, you have very nicely encapsulated and told. So, with the permission of the dignitaries here, I will very quickly go through as a presentation on the reforms that has been put forward, detailing what Dr. Shivan has just now detailed. I will share the presentation now. I hope the presentation is visible to all of you.
Yes.
Is the presentation visible to all of you, sir?
Yes, yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will just go through the unlocking of India's potential in space sector. So the Department of Space, as you are aware, carries out the end-to-end space activities, which include, one second. Yeah, which includes as the design, development, and realization of launch vehicles, We have design, development, and realization of the spacecrafts, the launch and post-launch activities, and space-based services. So these four major verticals define the activities of Department of Space. And how do you carry out these activities? We need to have infrastructure and facilities of various ISRO centers which are being extensively used for this. Research carried out in academia, and maybe all of you are aware, more than 500 industries are involved in these activities, and they produce the components. And it is indeed noteworthy that 80% of the launch vehicle and 60% of the spacecraft budget is spent in industry. This message or this particular fact may not be known to many people. That's why we wanted to stress this point. And what is the kind of activities that is emerging in the space sector now? If you look at it, the space-based services and applications have grown in multitude, much more than that what we really envisaged, we really thought. They have spiraled, and the demands and the requirements are phenomenal. And this particular demand can be really made use of. They have a huge commercial potential. And the private sector, as on now, is engaging in space activities, and they are much eager now. We are getting a lot of inputs, a lot of discussions are coming, a lot of people are coming forward for making the launch vehicle, for making the satellites, and especially providing the space-based services. So definitely, it is a fact, and we very strongly believe that participation of the private sector in the end-to-end space activities is definitely a strategy to expand the space economy. And the major reform or the major announcement or the major decision that the government of India has recently done is the opening of the space sector, and a series of reforms have been suggested. Then the government of India has approved the space sector reforms for the greater participation of the private sector in these activities. So what are these activities? The private sector is allowed now to carry out end-to-end space activities through suitable enabling mechanism. We have made announcement of opportunity to industries to come forward with new technologies and new processes. And ISRO will definitely, as Secretary DO has told, will focus on development of new technologies and at the same time enabling the sharing of its facilities to the private sector. As you are aware, ISRO is having a huge infrastructure, and especially many of the facilities or the kind of test equipments that we have may not be available in the country, and it is always worthwhile to engage the private sector in utilizing these things, so that it is a win-win situation wherein the private sector also need not invest in those infrastructure. And we also have Department of Space has New Space India Limited, NSIL, which is our public sector unit, to own operational launch vehicles, satellites, and services. I will at a later chart or later slide, I will dwell upon the New Space India Limited. The gamut and the requirements or the responsibilities of NSIL has been changed or added, augmented. So let me also reiterate here that, as Dr. Shivan specifically told, the idea of these reforms does not mean that ISRO is getting privatized. This we want to stress here, because the basic idea is, unlike the earlier times or the present times where the entire activities related to space is being carried out by ISRO end to end, we are now enabling the private sector also to carry out their space activities, be it a launch vehicle making, be it a satellite making, or be it the space related services. The private enterprises are allowed to carry out their activities, and as I told earlier, for that we need a mechanism to enable them, to promote them, to handhold them, at the same time to regulate them. So that is a mechanism that we are introducing here, so that things will be much more easier and user friendly for the private sector to carry out their operations. At the same time, it also should be noted that the primary purpose of this activity is also to see that the burden on the government is getting reduced, and the private sector is encouraged to invest more on such activities to carry out their space-based activities. So what does the private sector can do? What we feel or what we envisage is, as I said earlier, the building of the launch vehicles and providing the launch services, building and launching satellites, owning satellites and operating them, and providing the space-based services. These are the four major pillars that we feel that the private sectors can actively engage. So what does the DOS will do? DOS will enable these private players to accomplish whatever I told earlier, the space activities. How do we do that? We have to promote and handhold these private players to enable them. And we can share our facilities, our expertise, our technology, our knowledge. And as the case may be, it can be free of cost or it may be at a reasonable cost, which can be worked out case by case. And definitely a mechanism is required to do that, so that the most important thing is the creation of a national level autonomous nodal agency. It's an independent agency which is going to permit and monitor the private sector space activities as per the defined regulatory provisions, and permit the usage of ISRO facilities as per the private sector's requirements, and promote and handhold these private players. So a mechanism is required, and that is what Dr. Shivan was mentioning in his address. And for all these things, one of the primary requisites we feel is the enactment of the Space Activity Bill. As you are already aware, the Space Activity Bill is it's in final shape now. We have already presented it to the our ministry, PMO, for giving the for doing the inter-ministerial consultation, and we feel that very soon this will be cabinet approved. This will be approved by cabinet and presented to Parliament for making it an act. This is mandatory because, as you know, India is a signatory to the Outer Space Treaty. So this activity bill, which defines what are all the regulations and what are all the kind of liabilities that will have, is essential. So the mechanism, what is the mechanism that we are introducing? It is the establishment of an Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center in space, which is again an autonomous nodal agency under the Department of Space, which will be doing the enabling the promotion and hand-holding of the industries, building of the launch vehicles and satellites, sharing of the ISRO facilities, as I told earlier, establishment of facilities in DOS premises. That's very important. Many of these facilities may not be available outside, especially if you talk about having a launch pad, because each of these private enterprises may be coming out with their own launch vehicles, and the present interfaces may not be adequate or it may not suit. So what we are telling is that we will enable them to establish the launch pads in those premises, and definitely the launch campaign and launch has to be authorized, and they need the licensing and the regulatory mechanisms or approvals for the space-based services. And another very important and very responsible activity that InSpace needs to carry out is a drawing up of an integrated launch manifest, which is based on because now there are three sets of players in the space sector now. Based on this, we have the ISRO, we have the NSIL, which takes care of the commercial requirements of ISRO, and we have the private sector. So there's definitely there can be conflict of interest, there can be conflict with respect to time, with respect to facility, with respect to resources. So all approved or all agreeable an integrated launch manifest will be required, and InSpace is now assigned the responsibility of doing that job. Now, what is the architecture of InSpace? It is an empowered national body. It has a board. I will come to the constitution of the board, and apart from the board, it has its own directorates, which takes care of the many of the various facets of the activities related to InSpace. We have a technical directorate, we have a legal directorate, we have a safety and security directorate, and we have a single directorate for monitoring and promotion activities. So what the basically what will happen is the private players or the ENSIL or ISRO will be the act as applicants, and they will be applying to the in-space secretariat, and the directorates will go through those applications and accordingly advise the board to give the appropriate directives and appropriate decisions, and the board will act based on the inputs from the space activity bill, the different policies. We have specifically mentioned here the SATCOM policy, the remote sensing policy, the navigation policy, and we have some more which is in the annual. I'll be explaining that in a later stage. And based on this, they will give a directive so that then they will permit the space activities by private players, the integrated launch manifest they will make, the launch campaign and the launch also they will permit, and they will also, depending on the requirement and the ISRO's requirements, they will be allowing the sharing of ISRO facilities also. So this very briefly represents the various activities that InSpace needs to carry out. Now, it will have the InSpace will have a very defined institution with its own cadre for manning its various activities like secretariat activities, the administration, and the activities of the directorates. It will be chaired by a secretary grade officer, and it is fully empowered to take absolutely independent, unbiased decisions. And the composition of the board will have members from InSpace itself, especially the directors of the directorates, then members from industries, the members from academia, and definitely members from DOS. And what is mandated now is whatever decisions that InSpace makes will be binding on all the stakeholders. They have to do. And as I told earlier, there is a directorate for monitoring and promotion, and that inbuilt monitoring mechanism ensures that implementation of the decisions are properly done. And in case of any conflict, in case if it arises, we have our Space Commission, and above that we have the existing TDSAT, which is proposed now as an appellate body for resolving the conflicts. Now, again, coming to the composition of the InSpace, as I said, there will be a secretary grade person as chairman, and we have full-time members as part of InSpace. We'll have members from industry, academia, and from DOS. And the directorates, as I mentioned earlier, we have a technical directorate, safety and security directorate, legal directorate, and promotion and monitoring directorate. The promotion and monitoring directorate also have the responsibility to see that the quality, reliability are also maintained. Now, I'm giving two examples to indicate or to make you aware that the entire process we want to streamline and make it user-friendly and simple without any complication. So that is why these next two slides we are depicting that. Basically, the application by the private player will be given to the office in an online portal. As I said earlier, the technical directorate, the legal directorate, and the other directorates will go through that, and the InSpace board will review it, and the permission will be granted for a particular activity as sought by the applicant. And these activities, while it is carrying out, will be monitored by the promotion and monitoring directorate, and appropriate feedbacks will again go to the board, so that it's a complete closed loop system which makes the entire process very stable. And we also have the provision to see that these activities are regularly apprised to the Space Commission. So this brings a very unambiguous and a transparent procedure to all. And as I said earlier, we have provisions for resolution of disputes if at all anything is coming. And the application process, for example, if somebody wants to share the facility of ISRO, they can directly apply on online portal. The InSpace board will discuss based on the inputs given by the various directorates, and it will give a decision, and it will identify the facility that is required, which is available in the ISRO facility, and will inform directly to the applicant or the private player, as well as it will inform the center, the facility in charge of the center where the facility is going to be utilized, and the activity will be carried out. And I said earlier, the closed system will automatically act through the promotion and monitoring directorate. So the system is very simple and straightforward, no complications. And in case they want to establish a facility, as I said earlier, the same process is followed. The space allocation facility establishment, the board will decide. It will be informed to the concerned center as well as the applicant, and the closed loop system will act. So we feel that this simplified mechanism will work in a very seamless manner. And we also have ISRO has also announced announcement of opportunities for the private sector has been also already done. It will identify the cutting edge technology areas which industry can look into and basically aid the activities of ISRO space activities. And we also plan to give opportunities in selected science and exploration missions to the industry, and definitely technology spin-offs will be offered for a mass production. What we are trying to say is that the technology that we are using for space can be modified for commercial use, and that product, the modified product from the space technology, can be mass produced for the public use. So that will be a huge benefit to the country. Now, as a part of this or a starting of this, we have already announced the opportunities for the Human in Space Flight program, and the last date is 31st August 2020. All the details are given in ISRO website, wherein various phases or various activities related to the space flight program has been announced. For example, like debris management and mitigation, space bioengineering, radiation hazards characterization, thermal protection system, etc. So a gamut of activities are identified, and we already have a very good response, and we feel that this will be a huge this will make a huge impact in the whole of Indian academia and the students as well as the industry. And now let me come back to ENSIL. As I told earlier, ENSIL is the PSU of ISRO, which is mandate. Earlier, the mandate of ENSIL was exclusively like the production of PSLV and our SSLV, small satellite launch vehicle production through the Indian industry. Then, of course, providing the launch services for customer satellites and space-based services and technology transfer to Indian industry. These were the scope of ENSIL. And the basic idea was that the commercial exploitation of ISRO space products and services should be focused, and Indian industry's growth also should be encouraged. Now, the total mandate has been enhanced. Now, ENSIL is mandated to own the satellites and providing space services on commercial basis. This is a quantum change or quantum jump, I would say. And it is also mandated to build satellites and launch them as per the demand. As I said earlier, the whole process has been changed to a demand-driven from supply-driven. That is a huge strategic change, I would say. The ENSIL also has mandated to provide launch services for customer satellites. It is mandated to build launch vehicles, not only PSLV, but SSLV, GSLV, GSLV Mark III, and the future launches that ISRO is going to further make. And it also should enable satellite building through Indian industry. And as I said, that remains. Technology transfer to industry is still there. And so that the scope has changed, it is becoming highly complex and capital intensive activities. The performing the operational missions of ISRO is a huge responsibility, and it also involves owning the satellites and space-based assets. So ENSIL ultimately will act as a satellite operator itself. So this is a huge change, and ENSIL is actively gearing up for taking up this responsibility and carrying it out. So as I said earlier, all these are possible only if you have a real infrastructure or a structure for the regulation and authorization and control. So the space activity bill is a mandatory for this, but definitely it is not, the space activity bill will not be a real prerequisite for carrying out the initial activities of these end-to-end space activities that private industries can start now itself. But ultimately, at the time of the final act, like launching or making a satellite and giving it for launch, etc. Before that, these regulatory mechanism will be definitely required. So it defines the space activities and associated risks and liabilities. That's the most important part, and defines the regulatory norms. Then the policies are also extremely important. So the present SATCOM policy and remote sensing policies has already been revisited. A series of committees have already reviewed the new strategy that we have involved or included in that policies, and that has been already reviewed. And very soon these policies are going to be announced and introduced. Apart from that, as you are aware, we are getting into the navigation aspects and the applications in a very big way. So there is a need for evoking a navigation policy. This also is almost on the finishing stages. Apart from these three policies, we also now feel, based on our discussions, that we need to have a space exploration policy, and also we need to have a launch vehicle kind of policy. So these also are being worked out, so that it will bring more clarity with respect to the private players or the private enterprises as to how to plan and strategize their specific activities. So with this, let me conclude. I think I have covered the whole gambit of the reforms that we are planning in a reasonably in a short presentation. I hope it satisfies many of the questions that people are expecting answers. So with this, let me conclude. Thank you very much. And now let us get into the phase of getting the valuable suggestions, inputs, and thought processes of our dignitaries. So let me first welcome Professor Vijay Raghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to Prime Minister. Professor Vijay Raghavan is, I don't have to give any introduction to Professor Vijay Raghavan. As far as we are concerned, we feel that he is part and parcel of Department of Space and ISRO. He is one among us. At the same time, let me also say that you also know that the important roles, it is a multifaceted role. As Chairman was rightly saying, he is fully involved in the space reforms and activities. He is fully involved in the generation of vaccine. So you see the kind of the broad spectrum that Vijay Raghavan sir is getting engaged. I think I don't want to dwell much on sir. Sir, we are really privileged to have you here. And let me welcome, kindly give your thought process and your suggestions for this, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uma Maheshwaran. Thank you, Dr. Shivan, for having me here. And I'm particularly privileged to be amongst my co-panelists, Ms. Mahima Datla, Mr. Anand Mahindra, and Professor M.S. Anand. Actually, the Professor Anand, Mr. Mahindra, and Mahima Datla, Ms. Mahima Datla point out to what the extraordinary opportunities which we have if we grasp them. We have between them in industry two very different kinds of industry, and which normally I mean until December 2019, you wouldn't have thought that these two kinds of industries would be talking to each other that much. I think that Professor Anand would be talking to these two kinds of industries on a literally minute-to-minute or a day-to-day basis. While there would be all sorts of collaborations, our principal jobs in various sectors was to bemoan the presence of siloed mentality and how we could break them and get people to work together. Then, very sort of as a bolt from the blue, even though it was expected, the pandemic struck. And it is remarkable to see how academia and industry of all kinds work together to address problems. The vaccine industry and the manufacturing industry, those making PPEs, those making ventilators, our academic institutions, our mathematicians, people who were never connected with disease biology, all of them came together with speed. This points out to some fundamental value which we now need to amplify using the space sector as a model and take to other sectors. What is that fundamental value? That fundamental value is at the foundation, you need extraordinary core capabilities cutting across disciplines in science and technology, in humanities, sociology, economics, and everything. If you have that core capability, then you're prepared for the unknown which can come upon you and you can rejig to do anything. That's the important point. Then the other aspects become important. We need to have a connect to industry. Industry needs to be nimble. Government needs to have a regulatory framework which is accessible to all yet robust. These things follow, and the space sector reforms point to that. I'd like to add on this foundation another challenge. Maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, there was a meeting in which Anand Mahindra was there, and we asked why is it that industry is not investing sufficiently. His industry invests sufficiently in R&D. And he pointed out something very important. He said it's not that industry doesn't have capital. Industry doesn't have risk capital. If you look at the kinds of resources which big companies all over the world put into R&D, each company puts in more than the funds of the entire US National Science Foundation in their R&D. If Indian industry is to be competitive in that situation, risk needs to be mitigated. Now, the solution to that risk mitigation comes from people in environments such as Professor Anand, because those environments, our research institutions, our universities, the best amongst them, have extraordinary talent, very well trained, and IIT Madras is a particular example of that. But also there are extraordinary resources, material resources available. So this combination of talent and material resources, when partnering with industry, allows risk to be mitigated. And for every 10 rupees of industry's investment, there's about 90 rupees of investment in kind, which an academic environment can bring in terms of talented people, not only in one location, but across locations in India, that talent is there, and across the world. So this partnership between industry and academia on risk mitigation is something which can be done, whether it is in manufacturing, in AI, or in vaccines, and so on. And indeed, it's happening. Mahima today is partnering with groups in the Indian Institute of Science to develop vaccines. Indian vaccine manufacturers were well known for their manufacturing, but today they're grasping opportunities in early stage development and research in a manner like never before. So this is a combination. Now overlay this combination of this academia-industry partnership with the third, which is the enormous infrastructure, capabilities, and technological core which an organization like ISRO brings. And I know we're moving from a set of fields to what apparently is a narrower field of space alone. But space has two characteristics. Space has characteristics as a frontier and direct space applications on land, but it also has an enormous application in dual technologies, dual use technologies of various kinds. Those which can be used in space and those which can be used routinely on land. So this now combined, the reforms in space combined with this industry-academia partnership allows the opening up of the frontier to India like never before. I'd like to end by India is unusual in its space exploration in that we must give credit to ISRO and its founders and its leaders over time who have constantly articulated space for society as its role. So space has had an enormous impact on society. With this opening up, space will have an impact not only on the space sector in India, but the space sector globally, and also on all sectors in India. India's presence in the space sector is characterized by a notable presence in volume. But in terms of the entire space industry's budget, India's role is minuscule. This is now an opportunity to increase both volume and quality in extraordinary ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vijayaraghvan sir, for very valuable, very short, very concise, but loaded with suggestions and meanings. Thank you very much, sir. So I think now let us move on to Sri Padma Bhushan Anand Gopal Mahindra group, who always advocates change the rules. So this is an apt time for you, sir, to advise us how we are going to change the rules. And most of you may be already aware, the Frontline magazine, the Fortune magazine, had included Mr. Mahindra as part of the world 50 greatest leaders. And also in the 2011 listing, he was listed as Asia's 25 most powerful business people. So over to Bhushan Anand Mahindra, a very powerful business magnate. Kindly advise us, sir.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Dr. Shivan, your distinguished colleagues at ISRO, Vijay, Mahima, Professor Anand. You know, it was exactly on July 20th, 1969, which is 51 years and 1 month ago to the day that Neil Armstrong entered the history books by taking the first step on the moon. And no one who heard that news then can ever forget the impact that it made. There were new frontiers to push, new worlds to explore. Literally, it was like seeing infinity unfold before us. Now, India is amongst only 7 nations that have pushed that frontier ever further. Thanks entirely, of course, to the praiseworthy achievements of ISRO. And I even have a vague recollection of seeing a photograph in the 80s of some sort of small satellite or satellite launcher being carried to the launch place by a bullock cart. So it's obviously been a very great leap forward from there to 2017, when ISRO's PSLV launched a record 104 satellites in one go, with both indigenous and ingenious technology. And that was at a cost that made developed nations rub their eyes in disbelief. So today, with Chandrayaan and the Mangalyaan missions successfully accomplished, we're reaching Moon and the Mars. And Gaganyaan, of course, will doubtless see Indian astronauts and Indian-made rockets blazing new trails in space. Now, that was the first frontier. Today, 6 decades after ISRO was founded, it's time to change the paradigm. The second space frontier is opening up. And that is the frontier of the commercialization of space. So it's time to make the shift from seeing ourselves as a space exploring nation to a space faring nation. So if you think of the way that the sea was developed, it started with the intrepid exploration of an unknown ocean. And then, of course, man began to use these oceans for trade, commerce, transport, overseas expansion, even warfare, unfortunately. But as these activities expanded, legal and institutional frameworks, international and domestic both, they emerged to support these activities. And it's the same with the air. With airspace, the initial exploratory and technological phase of aeroplanes evolved into commercialization through airlines. And space, I think, is at a similar point today, and we are lucky enough to be in at the ground floor. Space may well become the new gold rush. And why this gold rush? Because there is gold at the end of the rainbow, plenty of it, for governments, for businesses, both. And it's a market that in 2018 was estimated at around $350 billion, expected to grow to a whopping $3.3 trillion by 2045. Now, India has an established incredible space program, but its share of the market is minuscule. And I'm hopeful that beginning today, that's going to change. I believe there are 3 major drivers that are going to propel the global space economy: cost efficiency, frugal innovation, and high-end engineering skills. And happily, we possess all 3 in abundance. The success of Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan, PSLV, their high-class technology, and their bargain basement costs provide visible proof that we tick all three boxes. And we also have proven capabilities in core market segments like telecom, video, Earth observation, navigation, that are going to see very high rates of growth in the next several years. Now, apart from this, the demand in India alone for space-based applications and services is far exceeding the supply. Dr. Shivan, you've been quoted in an interview as saying that ISRO would have to be expanded to 10 times the current level to meet just the current demand. Now, frankly, this is something I find even more exciting, I have to admit, than sending astronauts into space. Why? Because technological advancement profoundly changes lives of people on Earth, and the faster, the better. ISRO has become a major change maker in India. So many areas of our lives are impacted by your activities. Our entertainment, our communications, our security, weather forecasts, education, knowledge, even our ATMs owe something to ISRO. But there is no reason why ISRO should go it alone. And that's why we're here today. Imagine how much we could accelerate the pace of change by facilitating private players to take over much of this. It could free ISRO up to focus, as you said in your opening remarks, on high-level space exploration and strategic areas of national need. And it would enable private players to do good and do well both at the same time, to make profits, as well as drive positive change in the lives of our citizens. Now, of course, there are going to be many challenges. Everyone knows that Elon Musk almost went bankrupt developing the Falcon before he launched it successfully on the 4th attempt. What is less well known is the fact that the Falcon 9 launch clocked in at 1/3 the price of a traditional NASA contract launch. So even NASA, with its bottomless money supply, is trying to change its mindset and capital allocation policies to enable private players to collaborate with it and flourish. And for India, this is going to be a pivotal moment. It is our opportunity to level the playing field by leveraging our competitive advantages, and we have to seize it now. The question, of course, is how do we make these reforms work? Because industry and the public sector, let's admit it, are often uneasy bedfellows, as the saying goes. We each have different priorities, strategies, and aspirations. And yet a public-private joint endeavor is indeed the best way forward if we are going to leverage the window of opportunity that's opened up. Now, you're going to have speakers all day today who are far more qualified than I am to give you concrete suggestions and answers. But let me try and draw you a picture, because I'm a sort of right-brained, visually oriented person, and I often think more in images than words. And the picture that comes to my mind is that of a legendary creature from Indian mythology whose two very different halves make a very unexpected whole. And I'm thinking of Vishnu in his avatar as Narasimha, half man, half lion. Now, this is a mythological analogy that I had used before many years ago when speaking at a NASCOM conference, but I think it applies here even more aptly. I'm visualizing an ecosystem for a public-private partnership that combines the knowledge and intellect of a human being with the fearlessness, the speed, the strength, and the killer instincts of a lion. That is the kind of ecosystem you may want to think about. It's an unconventional but effective amalgamation of different entities. Now, Lord Vishnu took on the avatar of half man, half lion for a very specific reason. He had to tackle the demon Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyakashipu, as we all know, had obtained a gift from the gods whereby he couldn't be killed inside or outside, by night or by day, on the ground or in the sky. And believing himself invulnerable, he ran amok. So people begged Vishnu, as the story goes, to save them, and he came as Narasimha. He had to overcome Hiranyakashipu without violating the terms of the gift, which of course seemed like an impossible task. And how did he do that? The short answer, by thinking differently. He dragged Hiranyakashipu into the courtyard, which was neither indoors nor outdoors. He did this at twilight, which was neither night or day. And he conquered the demon by breaking him across his knee, which was neither earth nor sky. So I would urge all of us to keep this story in mind as we deliberate on ways to unlock the space sector. Think of creating structures and systems that have never existed before. Think differently about achieving the goal, whether you're a public or a private player. Think of what support you might require from the law, from financial institutions, from regulators, from academia to make these structures work. Think of what incentives and rights need to be given and how they are to be protected. And let's make it part of our work to think about how to produce the next generation of problem solvers like Narasimha. Let's think beyond existing paradigms, and I think the answers will emerge. The ultimate goal is to create a catalyst for space entrepreneurship. So in conclusion, today's meeting is a seminal one. The first step towards becoming a space-faring nation, as I said. So let me end with a story that encapsulates my hopes for our Indian equivalent of the Starship Enterprise. Up to 2014, NASA had relied heavily on Russian rockets to get their astronauts to international space stations. And in 2014, sanctions were imposed on Russia that affected the Russian space industry. And the then Russian Deputy Prime Minister Rogozin apparently suggested sarcastically that without Russian help, the US would have to use trampolines to bring their astronauts to the International Space Station. And then let's fast forward to May 2020, when Elon Musk's spacecraft Endeavour became the first ever crewed orbital flight operated by a commercial provider to be launched from the US. Elon Musk famously tweeted, "Rogozin, the trampoline is working." In our case too, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we will succeed in building a trampoline that will literally take us to the stars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand sir, for a very, I would say, exciting and thought-provoking comments, especially your imagery with respect to Narasimha. I would like to add also here that he used his claws to kill him, which is not a conventional weapon. So it is very apt that you have told this, so that we need to have claws now in this. Thank you very much, sir. We'll come back again. Now let us move on to Srimati Mahima Datla. Madam is the Managing Director of Biological E Limited. Under her leadership, the Biological EE has demonstrated tremendous growth given the successful WHO pre-qualification and the launch of pentavalent and JE vaccines. Her presence is befitting and significant today, especially considering the present COVID scenario. So, Madam, over to you for your thoughts.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Professor Vijay Raghavan, ISRO, and all of the colleagues on this panel. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I have to confess, I grew up as a big fan of Star Trek. So in my mind, space is really the final frontier, capturing the imagination of not just the imagination, but the hearts of people. And it really is a demonstration of bringing the best of human endeavor to fulfill and meet our aspirations. I have to confess, though, apart from that, I have no connection with this industry or no knowledge, and I find myself woefully inadequate to be part of this panel. That said, what I can offer to do is to draw some parallels between the reforms in the vaccine sector and the ones proposed here. And I'd like to draw these parallels across three different areas, which is R&D and innovation, offsetting fixed costs and large-scale infrastructure, and creating an ecosystem that creates financial incentive and sustainability. Historically, vaccines were made by governments, and they did this in the interest of national security. They believed immunization was so important that it needed to be an endeavor undertaken by governments alone. What this led to is very few new vaccines being discovered against new infectious diseases. It also led to no incentive for the inefficiencies that were creeping into these industries. Today, I think largely vaccine industry is privatized or is a public-private initiative. And that was to address the innovation gap that everybody was experiencing. We ourselves are an example of the success of these partnerships. We partnered with the Indian Institute of Science of Bangalore for the hepatitis B vaccine. We're currently partnering with MIT, Baylor College of Medicine, National Institutes of Virology, TSHIT, CCMB, in our endeavors to make a COVID vaccine as quickly as possible. So we are examples of success stories, and there's several examples where the facilitation of private-public partnerships, academia, and industry has been extremely successful. The other point I'd like to make is in the vaccine industry, we always say this is a fixed cost business, because much like you go through several checks before a launch, we have to undergo several steps before we undertake the development and the launch of a vaccine. And these involve extensive clinical studies in human beings, in thousands of patients, but more importantly, it takes close to 8 to 10 years for these vaccines to become available. But the main thing is vaccine manufacturing requires tremendous fixed costs in terms of the infrastructure that it needs. But because of the partnership model and technologies that came about of innovation, today we are talking about vaccines being made in a footprint like a bedroom of a house. We're talking about vaccines being made embedded into 3D printed strips that you can just stick on. While these technologies are years away, we've already seen that with the relaunch or the ability to have rockets that can be relaunched, the cost offsets were so significant for the space industry. The third thing I'd like to talk about is creating an ecosystem that creates financial incentives. In the vaccine world, we call these as push and pull mechanisms. So the push mechanisms typically came, and the reason for this, just to take a step back, is that vaccines are meant for, some of the poorest people in the world. So they need to be affordable in order to be accessible. And the financial incentive is not always cut clear. And R&D development costs for this tend to be extremely significant. So recognizing this, there have been two mechanisms created, which are called push and pull. And on the push mechanism side, we've seen the coming together of governments such as DBT in our own country through BIRAC. We've seen the Gates Foundation being heavily invested in this kind of work. But we've also seen pull mechanisms where demand generation for vaccines and early adoption was done through an organization called Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. So in this context too, it's important that the financial incentives be created and the right ecosystem be created for this to be sustainable and for us to achieve a dream of being a huge player as part of that 3.3 trillion industry. In conclusion, paid off. Today, the vaccine industry in India is the #1 by volume in the world. I don't know too many industries that have the luxury of, have the luxury of claiming that. And I'm convinced that we need to have the same kinds of reforms to see a huge transformation within the space sector. So I'll take my thanks there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to an organization that the entire country is incredibly proud of.
Madam Mahima, you for your very thought-provoking speech, you have addressed some three specific things, including the cost effectiveness and the private-public partnership. You have stressed on that. Thank you very much. We'll come back in the later discussion session. Let me also welcome. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Sunil Mittal into our panel of dignitaries, I would say. Welcome, sir, to this panel. Actually, we started at 11 o'clock, and after the introduction from Dr. Shivan, we made a small presentation, a brief presentation on the reforms that we are contemplating, and the dignitaries are speaking, sir. Now let me go over to Professor Anand. Professor Anand is a luminary academician. He is a former director of IIT, as you all know, and he was the director from 2001 to 2011, if I'm correct. He is, I don't have to read out his accomplishments as well as awards. It is mind-boggling. And he is a pioneer, as Dr. Shivan already told. He is a pioneer with respect to the online education, as well as one of the first to start with the concept of startups and incubation in IIT Chennai. Sir, we feel that from the academia section, you are one of the most appropriate and apt luminary to talk about these reforms, sir. So over to you, sir, Professor Anand.
Required, you can mask video and audio. That is not
But it is not audible. So probably, I think, shall we move to?
Pardon? Huh? Okay.
Problem, sir? Okay. We'll go ahead with the Sunil Mittal, sir. You can just try to join immediately after. So what is the problem? Yeah, you play. Okay, so just continue and then. Yeah.
I think Professor Anand is. Yeah. Hold on. I think Professor Anand is trying to join. There's some bandwidth issue. He'll come soon. So I think we'll move on to Padma Bhushan Sunil Bharati Mittal, sir. We are indeed honored to have you here, sir. Sunil Bharati Mittal is the founder and chairperson of Bharati Enterprises. I don't have to tell all these things. Everybody knows. Bharati Airtel, the group's flagship company, is one of the world's largest and India's second largest telecom company, with operations in more than 18 countries. His list of awards I need hours to read out. One specific thing which I thought I will share is that he won the Philanthropist Award for year 2010. I think that gives a glimpse of the kind of spectrum that Mr. Sunil Mittal is involved. So thank you very much, sir. It's over to you for your thoughts and comments.
Thank you very much. At the outset, let me thank Dr. Sivan and all the esteemed colleagues at ISRO who have invited me to be a part of this wonderful initiative by way of this webinar. I have grown up to watch India's activities in the space program with great interest, and as some of my earlier speaker colleagues mentioned, with great sense of pride. I am in the world of telecommunications ever since the government of India allowed private sector participation in the telecom industry. And this really goes back to the year 1982-83, when I brought India's first push-button phones into the country, and thereafter the cordless phones, answering machines, fax machine, and launched India's first mobile telephony in 1994. So in some sense, I have been the long traveler on this journey of digital development in our country, and the privileged few in the private sector who were given an opportunity in our country to be a part of this digital ecosystem. My relationship with space started when we realized that the reach and depth of our terrestrial radio networks will remain rather limited, and we will need to lean back on VSAT to cellular backhaul some of our remote locations, whether they were in Andamans or up in Ladakh. And we started to use VSAT for cellular backhaul, and indeed for connecting many of our enterprise customers. And I'm talking about 20 years back, and that is the time when our interaction with ISRO started. And one was amazed to see that ISRO, coming from an emerging, at that point in time, third world country, was really taking a leading position in the space program. And the knowledge, the depth of talent that one saw at ISRO was really breathtaking. And I am really very proud to share with all of you that about 2.5 months back, when I was at 10 Downing Street to finalize the bid for OneWeb LEO satellite constellation, which the British government was trying to acquire out of bankruptcy, and we were deciding whether to bid for it or not. When I met the Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, he mentioned these words that while India is emerging economy, it is a first-rate power in space, and it's our ambition in the UK to catch up to that level of prowess in the space program. As you can imagine, my chest was filled with pride that here I'm talking to a first world, one of the leading 4 or 5 economies of the world, who are looking at India to take inspiration for their space program. So, Dr. Sivan, to you, to all your predecessors, and all those people who make the magic at ISRO, my very big compliments and congratulations to all of you. We also today are fortunate to have a Prime Minister who is very focused on the development of our country. Importantly, a person who understands technology, understands the power of technology and how it can take the agenda of digital India forward. And it is therefore a testimony to his vision that very recently we saw the opening up of the space program for private sector participation in India. This is indeed a very heartening news for all of us who are in the digital space. And this will accelerate our program. While I know ISRO has a multi-billion-dollar budget, but given what NASA ends up spending and many other space powers around the globe, including China, end up spending, I think the private sector participation will add more weight and heft to the space program of ISRO. I cannot imagine any one of us operating outside the overall guidance and ambit of ISRO. Most of us will lean on the talent that has come out of ISRO over the last decades. I have already had the pleasure of having a very deep interaction with Dr. Sivan and his senior colleagues, but equally I have now started to speak to many of the ex-ISRO people because that is truly the bedrock of our nation's repository of wisdom and talent in the area of space. It's also a matter of great pride for all of us that it's not only that we manufacture our own satellites and many components that go into it, but we build our own rockets, and we have had several successful launches over the last decade. The INSAT program is hailed across the globe, and the payload factors that we have had on our satellites are again doing all the fanciful services that are required in our daily lives, whether it is weather, whether it is broadcasting, or indeed some of the leading applications in the area of science, technology, and importantly, keeping our nation safe by catering to the needs of the defense industry. As a go forward, while India has now launched its policy on participation of private sector in the space program, my submission would be that we should build light touch policies, but very strong policies in terms of security of a nation, foreign policy, and some of these guidelines need to be laid out very clearly so that the private sector participants know as to how we can operate in the overall policy framework for the benefit of our nation. OneWeb is going to be the world's first LEO satellite constellation, flying about 648 satellites at 1,200 kilometers, covering every inch of the globe. And it is a deep desire that along with our support and cooperation from ISRO, we get our landing stations for landing rights for India, putting up 2 or 3 ground stations in north, south, and probably western part of India, and start to deliver these services in the early part of 22, once the entire constellation is going to be up. We would have started to test by the later part of next year itself, 42 degrees north, where we will start to cover the polar, the upper northern Europe, and we would have started to test a lot of ground and user terminals. It is here we would like to see, ISRO's hand and support at work to develop user terminals which cater to the needs of Indian requirements. As we are all aware, India needs affordable rural broadband connectivity. And we also very clearly know that reaching fiber or even terrestrial radio in some parts of deep Nicobar, Himalayas, the deserts in Rajasthan, and the deep forest in Madhya Pradesh is going to be almost an impossibility. But why should these people be deprived of broadband connectivity? We have already earmarked a lot of areas in India where the benefits of this LEO constellation broadband connectivity will be made available. One of the highlights of the LEO constellation is going to be low latency. We are currently testing some BMW cars. They are showing great promise and delivery at less than 32 milliseconds, which becomes a game changer as opposed to the geo satellites, which have a latency of 560 milliseconds, or even the MEOs, which have partial coverages around the globe at about 160 to 180 milliseconds. With less than 50 milliseconds, you start to get real-time interactive services, gaming, and of course, the downstream and all, which can also be done through geo. We will also seek to build a very strong rapport and cooperation agreement with ISRO to see that the combination of a GEO-LEO constellation for Indian territory is put to use, where we can combine the strength and capacity requirements of the nation by these 2 constellations. In closing, I would say India should be very proud that our forefathers.
I think now you can see me, maybe.
We can see you, sir.
Professor Anand Kumar, I'm just going to conclude and then I'll hand it over back to our ISRO colleagues.
Okay. Now I think I've done it on the.
In conclusion, I would say there is a great degree of head start in the hands of India. Our forefathers saw the benefit of the space program. The very foundations of ISROs were laid by our forefathers' vision. And now we have a very visionary Prime Minister who is going to take this mission forward. And I don't see that we will be too far from having our own vehicle land on moon and one of our Indians walk on the surface of moon in the coming years under the aegis and patronage of ISRO. I would like to, at this stage, wish ISRO great success in the coming days on the space program. The new frontiers that will be achieved will be in the space, and most of the leading nation states are putting enough and more efforts to start to explore the space program. I personally feel that with reusable rockets, with new generation of satellites, the space program has started to become very exciting. And India, I'm sure, will take a leading part. And we at Bharti and Airtel look forward to being an integral part of the efforts that India will put towards the space program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil Mitra sir, for a very, very comprehensive and thought-provoking input, sir. Let me introduce myself. I am Uma Maheshwaran. I am Scientific Secretary ISRO. You joined late. Let me thank you for very specifically. First of all, let us congratulate you once again for the fantastic achievement that you are going to plan with this OneWeb. It's very, very exciting. And already, as we have already started interacting with each other with respect to how to go forward in this endeavor. So we are also pretty excited with this endeavor, sir. So, and you have also touched upon the policies, which is, as we discussed earlier, also is extremely important. It should be light touch, as you showed, as well as it should be very strong with respect to our security and safety is concerned. So we'll take this point, sir. Now, with this, thank you once again.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to just Mithil sir was not there when we started this one. And today, when we work from home, it's become normal. This is the Bharti Airtel's the digital infrastructure is providing the mission critical internet support to crores of individuals and enterprises. Also, let me compliment Mithil sir for the inauguration of that undersea optic fiber link between Chennai and Andaman Nicobar in August 2020 is a major achievement that I would say. And serving that unserved and underserved is the guiding principle of ISRO, and I'm extremely glad that Airtel also shared those values there. And I'm extremely happy that Mithil sir has come and briefed us. I thank you for coming to us online, sir. Now, I just
Thank you very much for your kind words, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shiv. Now, let us move over to Professor Anant. He is a luminary in the academic sector, let me say, a former director of IIT from 2001 to 2011, a very long stint. He has got so many coveted awards. This Herdelia Award for basic research in chemical engineering. I think that's a very noteworthy thing. He is a pioneer, as Dr. Shivan told. He is a pioneer who started the first online education, and also he is a pioneer who was one of the first person to start the concept of startups and incubation in IIT Chennai. So we feel, sir, that you are the best suited, the most luminous person with respect to discussing the space sector from the academia. So thank you once again, sir, and over to Professor Anand for his comments and advice.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm sorry, my computer conked out. I had to change my machine in order to get reconnected. I want to thank Dr. Shivan first for inviting me to this program. And I want to congratulate the Department of Space for the timely creation of InSpace and NSIL. We are all admirers of ISRO, both nationally and internationally, for developing indigenous end-to-end capability in space technology, space activities. We have several centers, each with a core competence that meets the requirements of one vertical at least. We've also successfully outsourced manufacture of some components and services to industries, especially the medium and small scale. So this activity in itself is not very new, but the fact that you're throwing open your facilities, you're thinking of throwing open and developing a mechanism by which this can be done is, I think, very, very important. It's going to make a step change in the participation of private enterprise in your endeavors. I want to propose that one efficient way of doing this, of NSIL to approach its task, will be through the university research parks. I don't know if the IIT Madras was the first to start a research park, and this research park has been eminently successful. And since there are overlapping synergies, I want to talk about that a bit and then suggest how the research park, IIT Madras Research Park, can be used, or similar research parks can be used in advancing the goals that the Department of Space has. Today, innovation and entrepreneurship are central to the nation's successful participation in the global economy. Income from intellectual property rights is as high as 40% of the total income in some developed countries. We are far from that, very far from that. And fundamentally, research university is the main source of creativity. Creativity is of three kinds: discovery and invention drive the university's basic research. Innovation, on the other hand, includes a critical economic component and is often about extracting value from creative understanding of what is already known. So it has to be successfully managed, and we've not done that very well in our universities. It has to be successfully managed by what's called the idea factory approach. You bring unlike minds together, create the right atmosphere, give them freedom, but carefully structure interactions. University Research Park does that, just that. And it's basically a property-based venture located near a university campus. It brings together unlike minds, faculty with a sound knowledge of fundamentals, students with their spirit to conquer the world, and R&D personnel from industry with their ability to identify ideas that can be converted to marketable products. The University Research Park, the URP, helps convert research ideas into innovative technologies, houses R&D of companies, creates and nurtures startups, and drives technology-led regional development. Now, URPs exist in 60 countries. We didn't have one till the IIT Madras Research Park was set up. In 2002, I looked at some of the reasonable fraction of the patents in Silicon Valley, because that's supposed to be one of the most innovative places. We discovered that a lot of IIT names appeared, IIT alumni names appeared in the inventions, in the patents that came from Silicon Valley. I was looking at 95 to 97. In fact, Louis Pasteur said, discovery is the result of chance meeting a prepared mind. And I told the ministry that IITs have been preparing minds and chance has been meeting them in Silicon Valley. So I suggested that we should create the chance in our backyard. And MHRD agreed. In 2002, we made the application. It took all of 8 years to create the research park. It's a Section 8 non-profit company, but what it has achieved is quite significant. We got 11.5 acres of land from Tamil Nadu government and a 100 crore grant from the ministry. The total project was about 450 crores, and the money was raised in various ways. Startups are not part of research parks in most advanced developed countries where venture capital is readily available. They are, however, startups are part of the IIT Madras Research Park by design, and in particular interest in the present context is how startups are fared in IIT Madras Research Park. A total of 210 deep tech startups founded and promoted by alumni, students, faculty of IIT Madras, and in part co-founded by external entrepreneurs, have been incubated till date. Together, they valued at 7,000 crores based on investments by VCs. Many are in the market and have generated a total revenue of 430 crores in the last financial year and created over 4,000 jobs and 125 patents. To put this in perspective, in 2006, I was invited when I was director in IIT Madras, I was invited by the Commerce Secretary to come and receive an award for the university with the largest number of patents. And I said, there must be some mistake. We had only 6 last year. And the Commerce Secretary said, others had less. So, but the funny thing is that we are a very innovative people. We had done a lot of innovations, but we had not patented any. We hadn't gotten into this habit. The industry, of course, is ahead of us. The industry does patent whatever might be economically fruitful later. And in creating the research park, we've created a partnership. Large number of industries have taken space there. And now the park is a huge one. It's 1.2 million square feet. It has about 6,000 R&D workers from the industry working there. And we have a tremendous interaction with faculty, students, and the number of ideas that have come is reflected in the patents. From 6, we've gone to 126 a year. So it's an enormous number, and it has come mainly because we always have ideas. We've always had people with ideas in India, but we've not done this patenting very effectively. The industry, I realize, is much more aware of this. And the industry has helped us a lot in patenting ideas that have come up in the research path. So my own recommendation for ISRO, also we have a lot of interaction with ISRO. We have an ISRO IIT cell in many of the IITs. And this cell has been working on many projects of interest to ISRO, with a scientist from ISRO and a faculty member working together along with students. The remarkable thing about young students is that they come up with ideas that we wouldn't have thought of, or we forget to think about after a while. And this has helped a lot. And in the research park, for example, right now, we have about 4 startups, 3 of which are linked to ISRO in some sense. And the facilities that ISRO is now promising to throw open to the industry have already been thrown open partially to these people, partly because of contacts with scientists in ISRO. And my recommendation to ISRO is that they should take a cell in the IIT Madras Research Park. The second phase has been completed. There is space available. I'm selling this only because I think being there, right next to the IIT Madras campus, makes a huge difference. The faculty and the students and the industrial R&D worker are able to meet, especially with good food being served in the canteen there. This is an important point that Bell Labs made long ago. They said, we think only when good food is placed before us. And this has been done, and I think the interactions have been extremely successful so far. DRDO has actually taken a whole floor. I would strongly recommend that space take a floor too. And that way your scientists will be directly involved in the startups that come up, and they'll be involved directly along with the faculty in IIT. And this combination, we have seen, has been very successful in the past. So I would strongly recommend that. And it would be nice to have a ISRO cell there, because some scientists must be parked there from ISRO who can actually give good advice to startups and direct them in the way the ISRO sees their products being useful to them. I think this is important. Hand-holding the startups at the initial stage is important. And we will finally, my personal feeling is ISRO will meet disproportionate returns in a few years from now. So we have an incubation cell in the research park that does the hand-holding very efficiently. And to have ISRO scientists there helping in this process would be a dream come true. I'm not the director right now, but I'm sure Bhaskar Ramurthy, the present director, will agree with me in this regard. And I hope ISRO takes up space in the research park, or works through research parks in other IITs also. The other IITs have started the research park 10 years later. So but they are getting there. And I think any of them would be a very useful source to tap as far as ISRO is concerned. I want to wish ISRO all the very best. And I want to wish the new things set up, the new things that you have created. I want to wish them very well. I hope they succeed in creating this link and leading to very useful products. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Anand. You have very clearly focused on the research park achievements, and you have highlighted that probably NSIL can have the connectivity with the university through the research park. Also, you have already recommended that it's better to start a cell in IIT Research Chennai Park or in some other IITs. We'll take these points into account, sir. We are now running out of time. So before wrapping up, we have certain a lot of questions that have come through the public, because I think world over this is being watched now. A very good hit we have seen. So I will just here present some 3 questions. and I request Dr. Shivan to respond to that. The first question is, what is the future prospects of ISRO?
ISRO is going to do the it is right now it is doing that is ISRO job is not going to be stopped or reduced. That is our number one. Number two, that the more focus will be put towards capacity building and new technology development. Because it's not that we are not doing now. We are doing now because we are both doing capacity building and meeting the public demand. So now the public demand will be that I'm sure that will be taken care by that industry or private people, and so we can spend more energy on the capacity building. So the development will be very fast, and so that we will be on board with the advanced nation at the earliest. That is our need.
Thank you, Dr. Shivan. The next question is, can incremental space companies participate in, can international space companies can participate in Indian space program?
Now, at present, that whatever the system we are thinking is with only our Indian industries, and maybe this needs some more discussion. That maybe we'll see that later.
Okay, sir. Now, our next question is, will ISRO continue to seek help from private industry?
Yes, of course. Without private industries' help, ISRO cannot exist. You told in your opening, your presentation itself, that 80% of that activity is done in industries. Yeah. So that is so that continue to be there. So without participation of industry, that ISRO cannot exist.
And how to manage any mission with low budget?
Oh, it is very innovative strategies we have to adapt. See, like for any the strategy difficult situation, innovative that solutions will exist. In that today's morning, that our Anand Mahendra told the story about this one. That is when the Iranian Hasibu got that this one with in difficult situation. And God would find another method to overcome that one. Like that, for every difficult situation, there is a strategy that we have to do. That is a part of that our innovation, and they have to do it.
Thank you, sir. The final question: being space in the is in the strategic sector also, hope all precautions are taken for protecting the Indian security.
Oh, exactly. There is a reason that our in space is formed. That way for like another industry to start, there is no mechanism. Way for that space activity, there's a mechanism. That's the exact reason. Because of the dual purpose and the risk involved, the safety, security involved, and that's what the in-space mechanism will do. And that is the purpose of the mechanism we thought of.
Thank you, sir. And now, with your permission, since time is running out, sir, I'll with the permission of dignitaries, let me quickly wrap up what has happened. Professor Vijayaraghavan made a very short thought process where he stressed that one of the points that he's brought out is why industry is not investing in R&D, which is extremely an essential factor if this venture that we are opening up the sectors has to succeed. And one of the reasons what he was mentioning is with respect to industries not having a risk capital. So there is a requirement for risk mitigation, and the one of the solutions is to link academia, as Professor Anand was also telling, to link the academia and utilize the talent and the material resources. I think that's a very thoughtful suggestion which can be further taken up, sir. And he was also stressing that the infrastructure capabilities should be utilized to the optimal, especially taking into consideration the dual uses that the space has. Sir, we will take all your advices, sir. Anand Mahindra, as already mentioned, he stressed about three major drives with respect to cost efficiency, frugal innovation, and high-end capability with respect to technology and expertise. So, which is essential if this venture has to succeed. And he also brought the interesting imagery of Narasimha, which we have discussed, I would say enough. Now, Madam Mahima Datta gave an analogy with respect to how in the vaccine sector, the private-public partnership has become extremely successful, especially with the linkage with respect to academia, where the research is happening for the development of the vaccine. And she was also mentioning with respect to the need for appropriate financial incentives, which is a point which needs to be further taken up and discussed, because the ultimately the entire thing depends on the finance, and most of the questions related to this are also from how the financing is going to happen. So, and at the same time, we also know that government, the entire exercise that the government is doing is to reduce its burden with respect to the expenditure related to this industry, and expecting and cajoling the industry to invest to go ahead with the space activity. So this is a paradoxical situation which needs to be addressed, further discussed and taken up. Mithal Saab, we candidly talked about the requirement of light touch policies and the need for very strong and security and foreign policies. Sir, I would like to tell you here that we are modifying our SATCOM policies, our the Earth observation related policies, as well as we are bringing a new navigation policy, and also we are thinking of bringing some space exploration as well as launch vehicle policies. And of course, we have a encompassing space policy also. All these are coming very soon, sir. So it will bring more clarity with respect to that. Professor Anand again stressed upon the role which academia can very effectively play, and he himself was a role model by innovatively making the research park, which is still running successfully in IIT Chennai, and he was stressing that NCIL should have a collaboration with the research park so that the university linkage can be effectively established. And also he was recommending that we need to have a cell in IIT Chennai regarding this. So I think we have covered most of the points that has been brought out. We will make a detailed report on this, sir, and we will be coming back to you. First of all, at this juncture, let me once again thank all of you for spending your very valuable time. I know how busy you people are, but you have consented to be here and share with us all the thoughts and giving guidance to us. And I am sure now this gives us a lot of confidence to us also to say that the reforms that we are going to implement, or already we have started implementing, will be a resounding success, and it will going to transform the space industry and the space activities in India. So let me thank you everybody once again. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let us see how many hits we have.